Thank you very much, Mr. Bateman. We will start with questions. Questions? Councilor Caradonna.
Thank you for the presentation. Through the mayor, just wanted to circle back to the question of CACs because we got additional correspondence from the proponent that laid out in table form what their CAC offerings were, and they contend that the CAC offerings exceed what is required by the city when one counts the offer of the $1 daycare, the contributions to the Housing Reserve Fund, and I think the LAF and some other things in there as well. I want to get a sense of where staff is at on that question. Were the CACs, is the offer exceeding what we are requiring, or how do you consider these numbers?
Excuse me, through the mayor. So the inclusionary housing and community amenity policy indicates that a land lift should be completed, a study which was completed by a consultant, and that indicated that $2,300,000 would be an appropriate contribution. And then the policy goes on to say that it should be split 30%, 70%, so 30% to the Housing Reserve Fund and 70% to the Local Amenities Fund. So that would be $690,000 to the Housing Reserve Fund and $1,610,000 to the Local Amenities Fund. So there is a table in the report summarizing that the applicant is proposing $700,000 to the Housing Reserve Fund, which lines up with the policy. For the Local Amenities Fund, they're proposing $200,000, which totals $900,000 instead of $2,300,000. However, the applicant is proposing the daycare space, which has changed recently somewhat in what they're proposing, but it was valued by a consultant, the previous proposal, at $1,520,000. And independent of that, they are also proposing a number of other things, which are listed in the report, which would help ease the impact of this density on this site, such as stormwater infrastructure, public realm improvements, and I can go into more detail if you'd like. Does that answer your question?
It sort of, thank you, through me. It sort of answers my question, but what I'm trying to understand here is whether or not there is general agreement between what staff are saying would be the CAC and what the proponent is, because sometimes there's a bit of a misalignment. So I've got both screens open here, but the one I'm looking at right now is from the proponent that talks about, it lists out all the various CACs. So there's the $700,000 in the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. There's the $1.5 million for the daycare. There's $4,000 for an indoor meeting space of a minimum of 10 hours per week to the James Bay Community Project. There's $20,000 for public realm and pedestrian work. There's $200,000 to the LAF or the Community Amenity Fund, and they're proposing that go to the Peter Pollan Waterfront Park. There's several things. I don't need to list them all out here. EV chargers, undergrounding of BC hydro lines. For them, this adds up to $3.14 million. Are you in general agreement with these numbers? I mean, maybe there's not exact, but roughly, are you in agreement with these numbers? And if so, can we just clarify if this offer from the proponent exceeds what would be ordinarily required under our CAC policy or inclusionary housing policy?
Through the mayor, I guess two parts answer to that question. The first part is that only the daycare was valued by a qualified consultant, so they are committing to provide the other items in the list, but they do not have a dollar value that has been assigned to it, which I believe would bring the figure to lower than the $3 million. So it would be the $900,000 plus $1,520,000, as opposed to up around $3 million. And the second part of that answer is that the staff had encouraged the applicant to follow the policy, which does say to provide cash. However, the applicant chose to pursue not providing all of that cash, and they wanted to provide these other items. When staff reviewed them, they do line up with our policies, and so it is something that staff can see they do line up with the policies, and so we did decide that we could secure them through legal agreement.
Okay, I think that answers my question, Mayor, which is that it sounds to me like they meet and exceed the amenity contribution policy, although how much is maybe a little bit left undetermined because not all of it has been properly valued by a third party, is what I'm hearing. But that's fine. I'll leave that for there for now. I just want to get staff's general impressions of the revisions that were made to the proposal. I gather it still doesn't meet the OCP because of the current zoning, but in the parameters of what was directed by council for the proponent to work with staff to go back to lower the height, to redistribute the density and the addition of I think it's now 3-story townhouses. If staff is willing to make general comments about the impact or I don't know, does it become less unaligned with the OCP? Are you able to comment on, in general, how staff is feeling about the proposed changes?
Mr. Bateman?
Through the mayor, it is less unaligned, as in it does line up better with the OCP. However, it still is quite a bit outside of what the OCP envisions here at potentially up to 2 FSR and 6 stories. The OCP doesn't envision this as a sort of node where density would be concentrated, and so this is proposing something that the OCP doesn't anticipate, so it steps outside of that. And of course, when the OCP was adopted, a lot of research and consultation went into that, and it was determined that there should be specific growth areas for that growth management plan, and this doesn't line up with that sort of big picture approach.
Thanks, and through the mayor, you don't have a crystal ball, but my guess is that the new OCP is probably more likely to contemplate something like this happening, given the fact that right in the neighborhood, you've got the James, which is a 12-story building, you've got the Coast and the Admiral Inn, which are about 9, Grand Pacific is about 11. To my eyes, it seems to sort of fit in with its neighbors. Is it reasonable to assume that the OCP could contemplate this level of density starting next year?
Through the mayor, I believe we have Ms. Close on the line from our citywide.
Yes, there she is. Hello, Planner Close. How are you? Did you hear that question?
I did, yes. Thank you, Mayor Alto. So I think it's important to not try to presuppose what the forthcoming OCP will do. There will be lots of opportunities to discuss that in the new year, and I'm sure plenty of deliberations around everything. So I think it's important to be careful in that way. We can turn our minds to some of the engagement materials that are out to date and some of the conversations that we've had with the public, and none of those at this point are contemplating heights of this nature in that area. We still were primarily focusing on discussing forms with the community between that 4- and 6-story form throughout the city, and contemplating potentially some new small and large urban village style nodes throughout the city. And this was not one of them in those conversations.
Thank you. I'm going to move on and ask about the mixed-use components here through the mayor. Can you help me understand, in addition to a daycare, what would the mixed-use components look like? What would be the ground experience for the user here?
Mr. Bateman?
Through the mayor, we have some slides that I will just switch to here. Maybe I'll first show the floor plan, and then I can go to some imagery renderings. So in this image, the area sort of in the middle of the slide along Montreal Street would be the daycare. It's labeled as daycare on the plans. And then up at the top, there are 2 CRUs, so 2 retail commercial units that you can see there. And then there's a lobby as well to access the residential above. And then it might help to go down to a rendering, which are at the end of the slide deck. So this rendering shows the corner of Montreal and Quebec, so that those are the 2 retail commercial units.
That's Quebec and Montreal?
That's correct.
Okay. And where's the daycare from there? Just looking at that slide?
Through the mayor, the daycare is off to the right-hand side of this image, so you probably, you can't quite see it.
It's in like the base of the 3-story building?
That's right. There might
Okay.
be...
Thanks for that. Just a couple more things from me. One is about the daycare. We've sort of shoehorned daycares into a number of projects. This one came out of those conversations. Is there demand for more daycare space across the city and specifically in James Bay?
Through the mayor, I don't have that information at hand. I'm not sure if we...
Does anybody know?
We
like,
have.
are we at peak
Apologies.
I mean, I just don't know. I'm not clued into that. My kids have aged out of it. I don't know if there's demand for daycare right now.
I think it's fairly easy to suggest that whether it's specific to this area or not, that there has been significant improvements in childcare facilities, but there still seems to be the general sense that there is a need for more.
Okay.
Mr. Johnson, would you like to comment?
Thank you. Through the mayor, I'll just add that daycares are a supported use in all of our urban place designations in our OCP. So as a type of community service type of use, it's envisioned to be permitted or included in all of across the city, citywide. So I would assume that there was an identified need when that policy was developed to encourage more daycares across the city.
Okay, thanks for that. Last question for me through the mayor to parks this time. The offer from the proponent is for the $200,000 to go into the local area fund, specifically to support Peter Pullen Park. Just want to ask a two-part question there. One, do our policies allow for such a specific designation of a financial contribution to go to a discrete project, number one? And number two, would this, in fact, help move Peter Pullen Park along?
Mr. Newman?
Through you, Mayor Alto. Given the uncertainty with regard to timing of when a development comes online, it's typically the city's preference that these types of resources not be allocated to a specific location. That allows staff to have the flexibility to be nimble. However, it also allows staff to apply those resources when they do become available to a project such as Peter Pullen. But certainly it is in our opinion that creating the flexibility for those resources would be the preferred option.
Okay, through a minute, just as a follow-up, just to be clear then, in theory, this $200,000 would go into a fund that's James Bay wide. It could go to Peter Pullen, it could go to something else.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. I'll leave it there for now, Mayor.